Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fernan Dizon, Chief of the Copyright Services Division of the Bureau of Copyright and Other Related Rights, Intellectual Property Office of the Philippines, and I will be your moderator for this special plenary session. Our next discussion will take a look at the performers' rights. This discussion is especially relevant to Filipino audiovisual performances or performers in light of the recent accession of the Philippines to the Beijing Treaty on Audiovisual Performances. Here to enlighten us about the topic, Performers' Rights, a Global Perspective, please welcome the Managing Director for Society's Council for the Collective Management of Performers' Rights, Remy Desrosiers. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, sir. Remy, the virtual floor is now yours. Remy?
Yes, good morning, everyone. You pronounced it very well. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good. So let me just share my screen. Can you hold on? Almost there. So I guess you can see my screen now.
Yes, Remy, go ahead, please.
Very good. Thank you very much. So first, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate to this first international copyright summit organized by the Copyright Office of Philippines. I have to say that I'm always very pleased and very happy to join all these initiatives that support performers' rights. I was listening to the previous presentation, so I hope that there will be not too many, I would say, repetitions in my presentation, because there was a lot of information already shared that were very interesting and certainly similar to what I will tell you. So first, a few words about SCAPER. So SCAPER is as you said, the Society Council for the Collective Management of Performers' Rights. So it was founded in 1986. It is an international federation, a non-for-profit organization. We are based in Brussels, Belgium. So we are operating as an international platform for the development of the practical cooperation between performers' collective management organizations, CMOs. So these collective management organizations that are taking care of the collection for performers, not only performers, but at least performers. Basically, we are trying to help them improving their exchange of data, information, and obviously performers' rights payment all across border. What does it represent in terms of members? So as of today, we have 57 members from 43 countries. So you can see where they are located on the map. All our members, so all these CMOs, represent roughly 1 million performers. And I mentioned also two other figures. They collected in 2020 780 million euro, and they were also able to distribute to the performers 640 million euros in 2020. What are the kind of services that we are providing to our members? So first is to give them access to various materials, documentation. We are a kind of library to ease their international exchange. For instance, we have developed some master representation agreement that they can use to sign bilateral or unilateral agreements between them. But we have also code of conducts, guidelines, etc., that we provide to our members, the collective management organization. We are also organizing a lot of workshops, trainings, meetings, seminars between our members, again, to ease the transfer of knowledge, sharing of expertise, best practices, etc. One specific role of Scapper is also that we have developed internal databases. In fact, two databases, one for the identification of performers, which is called IPD. I will speak a little about it just after this slide. And another one for sound recordings and audiovisual works, which is called VRDB. Last but not least, we have the what we call cooperation and development activities. So we have a dedicated working group which invests time to provide expertise, human resources, experts to various local, regional, or international seminar, meetings, workshops, whatsoever. So we send some of our representatives to attend those kind of international meetings. I would like briefly to present you the IPD, the International Performer Database. So it is one of the two databases I was referring to because I think it's very, very important. So we have developed in 1997 a database for our member to identify properly a performer, and to assign to this performer a unique identifier, which is called the IPN, the International Performer Number. And this is to help our members ensure that in their exchange between two CMOs, they are talking about the same person, the same individual. Obviously, we have a lot of homonyms. Today, this database is used by 49 CMOs, and we have in this database registered more than 800,000 performers. So this is for Scapper. Now I would like to speak a little about the neighboring rights. So neighboring rights or related rights, which in fact is the extension of the concept of copyright for authors only. So neighboring rights and related rights are for performers, not only performers, but also producers and broadcasters. What do we mean by performer? Performer, as it is mentioned here, can be actors, singers, session musician, dancer, any other kind of person that are expressing themselves with their voice, with their body. So it includes also puppeteers. It can include also dubbers. This is what we call by performers. What is also interesting is to present you, even if I guess it was mentioned in other presentation, but very briefly, what is the background or the starting point, the legal starting point of this? Because contrary to copyright, which is something quite old, I mean, it goes back to the 19th century or even end of the 18th century, related rights or neighboring rights are far more recent. In fact, the starting point is the Rome Convention, the 1961 Rome Convention. And I just illustrated here on one slide what are the main topics related to performers and what is also is important to highlight. First is the notion of equal treatment between all performers from all the member states that have signed the Rome Convention. On the right side, you can see how many countries have signed the Rome Convention. The other one is, the second one is that performers are protected, again, certain acts to which they have not consented. The other one is the introduction of an equitable remuneration to be paid by the users to performers for broadcasting or communication to the public in any form. And in this convention, it was also stated that protection would at least last 20 years. Obviously, it has evolved since. And I'm very pleased to state that the Philippines are part of this convention, as you all know. The second one is the WIPO Performances and Phonogram Treaty, the WPPT, that was established in 1996. That it's far more recent, which has reinforced the right for performers. So you can see that there are references to economic rights. So here we are talking about reproduction, distribution, rental, making available. Also moral rights, so the right to claim to be identified as the performer and the right to object to any, let's say, a distortion that could be prejudicial to the performer. Again, the right to a single equitable remuneration for the direct use of phonograms published for commercial purposes, broadcasting or communication to the public, and the term of protection, which here is at least 50 years. So you have 109 member states that are part of this treaty. And more recently, as you mentioned in your introduction, you have the Beijing Treaty, which was established in 2012, but in fact was enforced only in 2020 after a minimum number of member states sign it. Today it's 43 members. And in fact, it's more or less similar to the WPPT, but with a special focus for audiovisual performers. So you will find the same type of provision in this document. What I would like now to present you or to evocate with you is the notion of exclusive rights versus remuneration rights. So exclusive rights, in theory, and if we look to all these legal documents, say that the performers have the power to authorize the use of their work. But in practice, in the reality, usually these exclusive rights are transferred to the producer of a recording in exchange of usually a limited one-off payment. While when we are talking about remuneration rights, those remuneration rights, they are non-transferable. So they can't be signed away in contracts. Therefore, it guarantees that performers will be paid all over their life, and they can't transfer this right. What is also very important with the remuneration rights is that, in fact, all contributors to a sound recording or an audiovisual work are entitled to receive a remuneration. So therefore, it can be a lead singer, but also a session musician that has participated only to one track of one album. It can be a main actor or a supporting actor. While when we are talking about exclusive rights, usually we are talking about featured artists that have signed a contract with the producer. So, sorry, what kind of remuneration rights are we talking about? So you can see here I have listed the type of remuneration that are collected by our members, the collective management organization. So on the left side, you can see 4 types of rights that represent almost 90% of the collection made by the collective management organization. So I guess radio and TV broadcasting are self-explanatory. With regard to public performance, so here we mean the right to play recorded music in public places. So just to avoid confusion. So it means that when you are going to a shopping mall or even a basic shop, in hotels, restaurants, bars, all places which welcome public, and there are music in the background, heard in the background. So it requires the payment of a remuneration right by the users. We have also the private copying. So the private copying is the right for an individual to record or save a recording, a sound recording, sorry, or an audiovisual work on a physical device. It can be a smartphone, tablet, MP3, even if it is less and less used, also a TV box. And in exchange of that, a one-time license has to be paid by the manufacturer or the importer of the devices. So this is a specific remuneration right that is, let's say, applicable only in certain countries. So this is something that you find generally more in Europe rather than in other countries. Also, it is spreading. These are the main source of remuneration from our members. So why remuneration rights managed collectively are essential? I would say that it would be impossible for an individual performer to keep track of the exploitation of his or her recordings and collect the associated remuneration from all the users. That's why it is done by the CMOs. In fact, CMOs protect all kinds of performers, whether they are featured artists or session musicians, main actors, or supporting ones. It is also important to remind that in many recordings, dozens of performers are involved, and all are entitled to a fair remuneration for their contribution to the sound recording or the AV work. What I can add also is that, and I think it was mentioned already in the previous presentation, most CMOs operate on a non-profit basis, and they are also controlled by their members that are the performers. Therefore, the distribution rules are also defined by the CMO and subject to the approval of their members.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry?
Please go ahead, Remy.
Okay. Last but not least, with regard to CMOs, they have also the ability to represent performers for their contribution to sound recording or audiovisual works that have been exploited in other countries, and therefore collect through representation agreements with or from international CMOs. So this is what I wanted to illustrate in this next slide, because again, administrating remuneration rights for performers is quite complex. So CMOs are a kind of one-stop shop for users, such as radio station, TV broadcasters, shops, bars, restaurants, who make the payments. CMOs collect from these various users and distribute remuneration after deducting their operational costs. And of course, being owned or controlled by their members, they have also to ensure a certain level of efficiency in their operation. And thanks to the representation agreement, they collect also remuneration rights for foreign performers. Therefore, they transfer the monies to the foreign CMOs, who will distribute it to the performer. So whether they have a direct mandate from a performer, they will pay them directly, or if a mandate was given to another CMO, they will use this channel to ensure that the performer, the final right owners, receive the payment. What are the main issues and challenges faced by the CMOs and the performer they represent? I wanted to highlight just 4 of them that I will now present you. For me, the first one is the identification. I mean, properly identifying performers and their contribution is very important. And this is something more and more complex, because we are evolving in a global world with multiple international contributions to a piece of work. You have alternate versions. with also a lot of featured artists. So for the same song, you may have various versions with different contributors. I mean, beside the original studio recording, you can have live versions, acoustic versions, rearranged version. And for all these versions, you may have different contributors. So it is extremely important to properly identify which sound recording or audiovisual work has been played in order to pay the right contributors to this recording. A second point is the lack of awareness from the performers about their right. And I would say that, and I think it was already mentioned, that there is a general lack of knowledge from the creators, including the performers, with regard to their right. And it is important to train and to inform the performers about their right for them to make what I call enlightened choice, to ensure that when they take a decision, they understand all the picture. I wanted also to highlight the COVID-19 impact. I mean, the pandemic has shown the precarious situation of many performers. Due to the lockdown and also the travel restriction, many of them, and notably session musicians, were deprived from their main source of remuneration. What are their main source of remuneration? Basically, it was the live performances and also to participate to session recordings in studios. And all this remuneration was down to zero for a significant amount of time. And the only source of remuneration for them during this period was paid by the CMOs based on the remuneration rates. And the last one that I wanted to highlight is a change in the consumption of music and AV works that has no positive financial impact for performers. And here I am referring to, let's say, the shift from broadcasting to streaming without remuneration rights for many performers. So as it is illustrated here on this slide, it is no secret that for several years, streaming platforms have become the main source to listen to music and to watch films and series. They are also the main source of revenues, but not for all the stakeholders. As illustrated in the right side of my slide, only featured artists are getting paid, and even a small share from the streaming platforms, while nothing is paid to session musicians. And it is the same situation for actors. So this was, I think, commented earlier by Paolo Lanteri. I would like to refer to the study on the performers in the digital music marketplace he mentioned. That is a very interesting document that I invite you to read, that was prepared by Chris Castle and Claudio Feijo, which really illustrates this situation. So what has been done, or what are we doing to tackle these main issues? Let's say first is in terms of identification. At Scaperside, we are currently developing an IPN dissemination tool to help stakeholders in the industry to enrich their own database with a reliable identifier from the start of the creation process. Many other initiatives exist. Many other identifiers are also existing in the market. In fact, we are promoting the use of the IPN by the performers. We want them, in fact, to, when they go to a recording studio, that they should always give their whatever identifier, but they should identify themselves properly. Therefore, we are supporting all initiatives that encourage the use of identifiers. A recent one you may have heard about is what is called credits due, which is to ensure a complete and accurate song metadata is attached to all recordings at the point of creation of the work. With regard the awareness of the creators, I would say that most of our members, the performers, CMOs, they are investing a lot of time and money in informing the performers about their rights. At Scapper level, we are also participating to international initiatives. I mean, this summit is a very good example, for instance, but we are also attending a lot of other international forums. Scapper is also part of the WIPO for Creators initiative that also intend to raise the level of awareness of creators. With regard to fair remuneration from online exploitation, we are supporting local, regional, and international initiatives that will ensure a fair remuneration to all performers when it comes to online exploitation. Quite recently, in 2019, the EU Copyright Directive introduced the notion of appropriate and proportionate remuneration for performers, and including also for streaming platforms, for revenues coming from streaming platforms. So now member states are implementing it locally, and we hope that we will see it in terms of figures. Even more recently, in the course of this year, in the United Kingdom, a special committee, which is called the Digital Culture and Sport Committee, a committee from the Parliament, from the UK Parliament, recommended also the government to introduce a right to equitable digital music remuneration for performers. So the main goal is to ensure a fair remuneration for all performers, whether they are featured or non-featured artists, all along their career. And that's pretty much all that I wanted to share with you today. I hope I was clear. Thank you for having listened to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Remy, for that great presentation. A quick reminder for everyone, we will have the Q&A session right after the next presentation. All right, to continue our discussion and to give us a local perspective on collective management organizations, or CMOs, please help me welcome the Executive Director of the Performers' Rights Society of the Philippines, or PRSPH, Ms. Debbie Gaite. Ms. Debbie, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Fernan. Let me just check if my sound is all right with you.
Yes, Ms. Debbie.
Okay.
You're loud and clear.
Can I share screen now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and it's so nice to see Remy here today. Hi, Remy, and thank you for your beautiful presentation.
Hi, Debbie.
Yes, hi. Let us begin by looking at the word collective. What is a collective? So it is defined as assembled into or viewed as a whole, or marked by similarities among or with the members of the group. Similar to a workers' union, a collective management organization's strength is its unity of purpose and common interests, negotiating as a group to ensure that its members' issues, concerns, and interests are put forth in proper venues and that their rights and welfare are protected and promoted. For performers, their major concerns, of course, are their working conditions, their talent fees, occupational health and safety, the development of the craft, and their intellectual property rights. Now, aside from the intellectual property rights, these concerns are managed by guilds, their associations, their managers, or individually by themselves. Intellectual property rights, such as related rights, however, are more controlled with government intervention and a little more technical because these are guided by legal provisions and by international treaties. Performers' intellectual property rights are called related rights or neighboring rights. They may be classified into two kinds. First are moral rights, the right of integrity, which means the right to object to the modification or distortion of their work that would damage their reputation, and the right to attribution or being credited as the performer of the work. Sorry to say, but the word CPTO does not work, so please avoid using that. Okay, the next is economic rights. Other economic rights are the exclusive rights over their live performances. This means that the performer has the right to prevent or allow his live performance to be recorded or fixated, broadcast, streamed, or used in any manner. These actions may only be done with the performer's approval or permission, usually through a written contract and for a nominal fee. However, once the performer gives his permission for the live performance to be recorded, his exclusive rights no longer apply. What takes the place of these exclusive rights are non-exclusive rights. The performer can no longer prevent his recorded performance from being aired, exhibited, streamed, or publicly performed. However, he has the right to demand payment if the recorded performance is reused for commercial purposes. Okay. So why manage related rights as a collective? Let me just brush through because the earlier speakers already spoke about this. So they talked about numerous users. This is so true, even for performers. The next would be foreign use. With all the Filipino channels overseas, it may be impossible for local actors to keep track of their performances being aired abroad. Same thing for music. With our growing Filipino communities in other countries who are homesick for Filipino music, they find ways to listen to their favorites through streaming sites, social media, traditional TV, cable, and radio channels. The third is protection from discrimination. Negotiating as a group ensures that the basis for rates is the same for each audiovisual or musical work. The amount of each performer receives will be computed based on an agreed set of rules between and among the performers themselves. Veteran actors and musicians will also tell you that being vocal and assertive about your rights may cause you to lose out on opportunities. So when you negotiate through a CMO, this minimizes the possibility of discrimination. There is also the concern about economies of scale, which means collecting as a group is more efficient than collecting individually. And last but not least, joining a CMO will provide you active and participative representation, especially in legislation and the formulation of regulations. From our experience, Congress, Senate, and the IPFIL rely heavily on organizations of stakeholders when they conduct consultations and committee meetings. CMOs are able to present position, support, or objections of the rights sectors that it represents, making the voice of its sector stronger. In the Philippines, where the laws are still in its early stages, particularly for intellectual property, a vocal representation, especially in legislation, is crucial. A CMO is also able to align itself with guilds or associations in the same field, as we also saw in the recent proposed intellectual property code amendments in the House of Representatives. The RSPH aligned itself with Asociación ng Musikong Pilipino, or the Musicians Guild, the MOWEL Fund, or the Movie Workers Welfare Fund, Free the Artist Movement, and IMPRO, the Independent Music Producers of the Philippines, to push for amendments for the Filipino artists. Producers, of course, opposed these amendments as expected, but actors and music performers had their voices heard through the organizations. Okay, next slide. So what is PRSPH? The Performance Rights Society of the Philippines is a duly registered SEC and BIR, in the SEC and the BIR as a non-profit organization, and is accredited by the Intellectual Property Office and the National Commission for Culture and the Arts. IPOFIL has accredited PRSPH for the enforcement of performers' exclusive rights and their remuneration rights for both audiovisual and music performances. It is a collective management organization built by performers for performers. Initially, in the early years, after the IP Code was enacted in 1998, it was a joint performers and producers organization formed between members of the Organisasyon ng Pilipinong Mangawit, or OPM, and the Philippine Association of the Record Industry, or PARI, led by Mitch Valdez and Mr. Danny Olivares, then the president of PARI. This was in the late 90s. This did not last long, as foreign counterparts belonging to SCAPR immediately advised founder Mitch that it is better to form a separate performers organization. He decided to heed this advice and formed a purely performers organization with the help of OPM, CATHA, AMP, PhilStage, and performers from the Philippine Film Academy of the Philippines. So who are our members? We have two kinds of members. First, the audiovisual performers. These are actors, singers, dancers, and musicians whose work consists of a series of related images that impart the impression of motion, with or without accompanying sounds. So these are cinematic films, TV series or programs, variety shows, concerts that have been recorded, theatrical plays, musicals, ballets, mimes, and dance exhibitions. Second, we have performers of sound recordings. These are featured singers, backup singers, session musicians, band members, classical music performers, conductors, voice actors, whose performances are fixed in sound recordings. Okay, the Intellectual Property Code Section 209 says that a sound recording that is used for broadcast, communication to the public, or is publicly performed with the intention of making or enhancing a profit. A single equitable remuneration, which we call SER, is to be paid to both the producer and the performers. So, if the music performer's work is an audio recording, the applicable provision is Section 209. This means that remunerations due must be collected together with the sound producers. However, if a music performer's work is recorded as an audiovisual performance, such as a taped concert, a gig, or any musical performance accompanied by a video, the remunerations will be collected by the performer. PRSPH is the only CMO in the Philippines accredited to collect both remunerations from music and from audiovisual performances. Okay, for audiovisual performances, let us take a look. Unless otherwise provided in the contract, this is Section 206, in every communication with the public, etc., an additional remuneration equivalent to at least 5%. This is the current rule. And I'm sorry that Mr. Paolo Landeri is no longer here, but he himself said this provision needs some revision. Let us take a look at why. The first hurdle is the performance contract. All rights, usually, including moral and related rights, all rights are usually waived in favor of the producer or the network. In perpetuity and in the entire universe, just in case you intend to broadcast in the space station. Okay. For a CMO enforcing actors' rights, the most logical and manageable system for both the society and the user is to collect for the entire cast. But with these contracts that have become the gold standard, enforcement becomes difficult. Performers, after authorizing the fixation, cannot prevent the airing or the rebroadcast of the work anymore because their exclusive rights are no longer applicable. So the broadcaster or the producers is free to authorize re-exhibition or retransmission or rebroadcast. Transferring the related rights to the producer will only mean that the former might miss out on residual income from local and especially foreign use. Let me give you an example. If, for example, a Filipino film is aired on Spanish cable TV, under Spanish law, the cable distributor has to pay the CMO AISGE in Spain, which represents Filipino performers in Spain. AISGE collects residuals from the Spanish cable distributor and will only pay the Filipino performer through the authorized CMO, which is PRSPH, because we have a reciprocal agreement with AISGE. PRSPH will pay its members who are the performers of the film aired in Spain. We cannot pay any other entity, just the performer. Thus, this becomes a lose-lose situation for the performer and for the Philippine economy if they are legally barred from receiving residuals. The next hurdle is the 5% rule, that the performer is entitled to remunerations at the rate of 5% of the original talent fee. Talent fees are not a matter of public record. Like salaries of employees in the private sector, these are confidential and are hardly ever publicized. Even more difficult to determine are the talent fees of performers from old films and old variety shows. The issue is more concerning when we talk about foreign films. Imagine collecting 5% locally of Mel Gibson's talent fee from a single rebroadcast on television. Plus, of course, the other cast members of, for example, Lethal Weapon. It will not be manageable. These are the existing weaknesses of the IP Code Section 206 that are detrimental to the enforcement of related rights for audiovisual performers. There is a need to amend Section 206 to address these issues and to incorporate the provisions of the Beijing Treaty for audiovisual performances. Fortunately, the IPOFIL is issuing implementing rules and regulations that may provide solutions for these issues, which the BCRR is launching during this summit. Okay. In recent years, PRSPH signed 2 agreements with the producers of CMO producers in 2013 and 2016. The 2 agreements with the local producer CMO did not work positively for performers because performers felt they received much less than what the law provides. No new agreements were signed, which was unproductive because no collections could be made by either organizations. It was an impasse. And both organizations stood pat on their non-negotiables and on conflicting interpretations of the law. No progress was made from 2018 to 2020. Okay. So from 2018 to 2021, PRSPH focused on strengthening its foundations through membership, recruitment campaigns, town hall meetings, public forums, and by forging foreign affiliations by reaching out to the foreign CMOs. So now, after 3 years, PRSPH represents hundreds of local performers and tens of thousands of foreign actors, musicians, singers, anime, music, and voice actors, K-pop artists, and from around the world, from Asia, Europe, Africa, and the US. In recent years, PRSPH was happy to see the establishment of the Bureau of Copyright and Other Related Rights in 2018. For the longest time, copyright and related rights were adopted by the Patents and Trademarks Office. So, because there was no provision in the IP Code for a Bureau of Copyright, but now there is after the amendments. So many developments were made in the last 3 years owing to the establishment of the BCR. The Philippines also acceded to the Beijing Treaty for Audiovisual Performances without reservations. This is fantastic, and it's a game changer for all Filipino audiovisual performers, including music performers. The BCRR is also launching new IRRs for implementing rules and regulations for related rights for sound recordings and for the implementation of the Beijing Treaty for Audiovisual Performances. Audiovisual performers are now accorded moral rights, which were previously only given to performers of sound recordings. The coverage of remuneration rights is extended to any subsequent use, including digital streaming and other forms of transmission. The implementing rules from the BCRR clarify also who is liable for the payment of residuals and provides options for the assessment of fees. So we are no longer required to abide by the 5% rule. The country's accession to the Beijing Treaty comes at a very opportune time. Looking forward, as these quotations from music and business sites will tell you, there is a defined shift in how audiences now consume music, from audio recordings to audiovisual music. One site says 55% use YouTube as its music source, and only 37% use audio streaming apps. Google boasts of 2 billion people accessing music through YouTube every month. And because new technology and artificial intelligence for music production are now accessible, it is so much easier to produce high quality music at home, even from home. This is the democratization of music production. With this, many predict that audiences would focus on local creations, mainly in audiovisual format, as more and more people produce their own music, made easily available as user-generated content. Therefore, the focus is on local music. PRSPH has partnered with IMPRO, the Independent Music Producers of the Philippines, to enforce remuneration rights for music and to promote locally generated music content. IMPRO is the first of its kind in the Philippines, a collective management organization for independent music producers with the secondary purpose of promoting and developing music, local music across the country. Its founding members are respected and multi-awarded artists who are producing their own and other artists' music, led by national artists Ryan Kepiad, Jose Marichan, Grace Nono, Gary Granada, and the treasurer, Bayang Barrios Villegas. Bayang is joined in its management by Chairman Toto Seryoso, President Marlon Barnuevo, Vice President Christian Malintiu, and Corporate Secretary Marco De Leon. The members come from all over the country, from Baguio in the north to Coronadal in the south, and the music they produce are in Tagalog, Ilonggo, Bicolano, Visayan, from pop, jazz, folk to rap and world music. IMPRO has made their introductions to the copyright world last Monday with the opening night show for this summit that they put together. Mr. Paulo Lanteri's presentation earlier gives us more reason to look forward to the future as forces try to correct the value gap. From Remy, we learned how musicians and artists are on the losing end of this value gap. But we are optimistic about the future of performers' rights, especially with the country's accession to the Beijing Treaty without reservations and with strong government and international support. We believe in our partners, that they have the best interests of performers in mind. Aside from IMPRO, we work hand in hand with various local artists groups, especially for our legislative agenda, including AMP, Free the Artist Movement, Mowel Fund, and other industry organizations. Together with IMPRO, we intend to enforce remuneration rights and promote and encourage the creation of more local content. We heavily rely on government support for the protection of artists' welfare and interests. In Congress, we have our proponents for the protection of artists and cultural workers. Congressman Tofte Venecia, who heads the Creative Bloc and who has authored the Eddie Garcia Bill and the Freelance Workers Act. Congressman Sharon Garin of the Committee on Trade and Industry, who is spearheading the IP amendments. And Congressman Ferdinand Gaite of the Committee on Labor and Employment for the protection of all cultural workers' rights. The FDCP led by USEC Lisa Dina Segura, is another hardworking ally, actively assisting performers, especially during the pandemic. For the recent developments in related rights, we have the IPOFIL to thank, led by DG Roel Barba. Most especially, we rely on the Bureau of Copyright and Related Rights under DDG Nelson Lalusis. We make special mention of Director Emerson Puyo and the DCRR team, who are always there to support and to guide us. Our foreign partners, CPRA of Japan, who sponsored our priceless training in Tokyo, FKMP of South Korea, Actores of Colombia, ISG of Spain, and UFMI of Uganda. These are our sister societies in the protection of performers' rights. Our supportive affiliate Cobalt Music is another valuable ally. We thank Scapper, who found time to listen to us and said they would find ways to support us. And most of all, we have our members, the actors, musicians, singers, dancers, earth shakers, artists who have never failed to inspire, entertain, motivate, and move our spirits with their craft. These are the people behind and beside PRSPH. Thank you very much for listening. Back to you, Fernan.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Debbie. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm round of virtual applause for Ms. Debbie. For the information of everybody, the IPOFIL, through its Bureau of Copyright and other related rights, together with PRSPH and the Film Development Council of the Philippines, came up with a book entitled On World Stage, Filipino Audiovisual Performers Guide to the BTAP, to help our Filipino audiovisual performers better understand the Beijing Treaty on audiovisual performances. This book will come out in ebook format and will be available soon for free download to the IPOFIL website. That is ipofil.gov.ph/copyright. So please stay tuned for that. Thank you very much. We will now entertain questions from our audience. If you have questions, you can send them through the chat box and we'll do our best to accommodate them. So our first question is for Remy. The question goes, are extras included in the concept of performer? For example, a passerby in a scene of a movie.
It's a good question. I would say it depends on the local legislation. Generally, no. But again, it depends on there is no unique rule on this, because you are really getting into a very detailed situation, which obviously is not mentioned in all the international treaties. And therefore, it's up to the national law and even more to the CMO itself to decide what kind of, what do we mean by performers.
Thank you very much, Remy. Another question, again for Remy. In practical terms, how is remuneration right collected? Who pays the remuneration right? What is the average rate of remuneration? And then finally, what the basis for computation? Based on gross revenue, fixed, or whatever?
So this is a very good question. So again, this is decided by the CMO, each CMO, based on the local legislation. So what are they doing? As I was mentioning before, a performer CMO is usually owned and or controlled by the performers, by its members. Therefore, they will draft what they call tariffs on one side for the users to pay, and also distribution rules for to define how they will, what will be the mechanism, the calculation to allocate the remuneration that they have received. With regard tariffs, so in fact it depends on the type of rights if we are talking we are talking about. Let's take a simple example. If we are talking about communication to the public, and therefore the fee that hairdresser, a shop, a hairdresser has to pay. Generally, the CMO will define rates based on the surface of the shop. But again, so if we are talking about a small hairdresser, I don't know, 15 square meter, so they won't pay the same as a big hairdresser which has 100 or 150 square meters. So they will have some kind of grids for the fee to apply. The same for a restaurant. They can take into account the number of seats in the restaurants to define some grids. But again, all these tariffs are defined by the CMO and are also supposed to be public. So when you reach a CMO website as a user, as a potential user, you should access all the tarification, all the tariffs that are applied to the different users. Was there another question? Because I think there was multiple questions. Did I miss something, or is it fine for you?
Yeah, I believe you have covered all the questions. Thank you very much, Remy. At this point, we have a question for Ms. Debbie. What would you say is your biggest challenge operating a CMO for performers? You're on mute.
Okay. For music, the biggest challenge is that there are multiple CMOs for the same related rights. And that will be very confusing for the users as well as the artists. And we look to the BCRR, the AGCOPHIL, to help us find a solution that would work for all the parties, all the stakeholders. Now, for audiovisual performances, we need those implementing rules and regulations that will incorporate the Beijing Treaty provisions so that terms are clear between the user and us, so that we can finally approach digital streamers of audiovisual performances so that we can make certain demands. So we really need those implementing rules and regulations. And I would like to know from you, Fernan, the status of those rules and regulations. Would you know?
I believe we are still consolidating the feedback from our last public consultation. And I'm pretty sure Director Emerson will be on top of everything and will make everything, everything possible to come up with the new IRR as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I don't have any questions here. Well, I have one, I'm sorry. And probably this is the last one for this afternoon. Do performers on online platforms still enjoy these rights? Probably Remy first and then Ms. Debbie.
So do performers on online platforms still enjoy these rights? What kind of rights? If we are talking about remuneration rights, in fact, no. So this is the main point. We are facing a change of consumption of media. I mean, music, films, TV series. As we mentioned, we were talking about this value gap. Today, when we are talking about streaming platform, the negotiation is only between the streaming platforms and the producers, the record companies. And if you are a non-featured artist, you can't expect any remuneration from this source of consumption. And if you are a featured artist and you have signed a contract with the record company, it depends on the term of the contract you have signed with them.
Thank you very much, Remy. Ms. Debbie?
Okay. Can you run the question by me again, Fernan?
Yes. The question is, do performers on online platforms still enjoy these rights?
All right. First of all, it is not still, because a lot of them still have to enjoy these rights because they did not exist before. However, I know that in some countries, especially in Europe, they do enjoy these rights. In fact, our colleague from Spain already informed me that he was able to watch Goyo through a streaming site, and he said you should be expecting some remunerations from Europe because this film is being shown there, but unfortunately not in the Philippines, not yet.
And just to complement what Debbie said, so it's true that not in many European countries, only in a few countries. I mean, I think it's the case in Spain and maybe in Hungary, but that's all for the time being.
Great.
Okay, so it really depends on the jurisdiction. Okay, so at this point, I would like to ask our guests and resource persons to prepare yourselves for a short photo opportunity. May I request our technical team to assist us on this? Thank you very much.
Okay, can you open your cameras? Okay, on my count, 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
On that note, we end our session again. I would like to thank all our resource speakers, Remy and Debbie, for the very informative sessions. Meanwhile, please stay tuned and join us for our next session with Jennifer D. Bonto for the session entitled Galaw, the Dance at the Time of Pandemic, a fireside chat with dancers and choreographers. Also, don't forget to check out other activities in our summit website, copyrightsummit.asia. Thank you. We have Director Emmer. Director Emmer, would you like to say a few words?
No, just thank Remy and Debbie for that insightful presentation.
Oh.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Again, thank you very much, Debbie and Remy, and we hope to see you around. And for all our participants, again, feel free to join us for our next session. Thank you very much.